And now on the Chicago Way, the woman who should have been governor of Illinois, didn't happen, but she's now running for Congress in the western suburbs, Jeanne Ives.
Good to talk with you, John.
So how's the campaign going?
From our announcement speech, which was Sunday, to now, we've raised just a ton of money online already. I've got a lot of support. We've got hundreds of volunteers that have already signed up online to help. So we're very excited about this race.
It is an interesting race because it seems in the Republican primary, we're having like a redo in a way, right? It's Evelyn Sanguinetti, the former lieutenant governor who worked with Bruce Rauner, and versus you, or you versus them, for the Peter Roskam seat.
Yes, and Peter Roskam and his wife Elizabeth have fully support my efforts and have endorsed our campaign. So we're very excited for that endorsement, and we think that we've got the ability to really take on Sean Casten and to, restore confidence in what's happening at the federal level. Sean Casten's wrong for the district, 100% wrong. And his big socialist policies will just destroy the 6th congressional district and what we stand for.
Yes, I would like him to comment on the Gang of Four that is controlling the Democratic Party now. They're all well-dressed.
Well, he's not going to comment on them. He's fallen in with them.
I'm not going to.
He votes 98% of the time with Pelosi and AOC. So they're his comrades in charge, and they want to essentially change what we have built under the rule of law, in the free enterprise system, and essentially just become a globalist nation instead of a nation state.
Now, Mr. Casten, if you're listening, and I'm sure your aides will listen, and so will Ms. Sanguinetti, you're all invited. I'm talking to Jeannie now, but you're all invited to come on to the Chicago Way. We are ecumenical in our views. So let's proceed. Where's Sean Casten's weaknesses politically? Well,
politically, look, he believes in the urgency of the Green New Deal. Even at the same time, he says that he rejects some of what she says. But the truth is he claims to be a climate scientist and wants to protect us from climate change. And now nobody disagrees with the climate change. Look, 1,000 years ago, it was hotter than now. 2,000 years ago, it was hotter than now. 7,000 years, same thing. It's what do you do to adapt to the current environment, knowing that really nature has its course rather than man-made global warming. And Sean Casten's idea would basically just put more government regulations on the energy sector. And in the state of Illinois, we are an energy leader. So he would essentially destroy a large portion of our Illinois economy. And then after doing that, he thinks he wants to eliminate private health insurance. The health insurance that 180 people get from their employer, put everybody into Medicare for All, which would collapse the system. So, it's just nonsense. It's just big government. And the core question here is, do you believe in freedom and the free enterprise system, or do you think more government equals more freedom? That's a question people have to ask for themselves.
And Jeannie, thanks for joining us again. I brought it up last time we taped with Kristen McQuarrie about the idea that from a 30,000-foot view brought Peter Roskam losing to Sean Casten was the idea that Roskam was put out as, he's this guy who did all this legwork for Trump in economics, and in that district, that didn't fare particularly well, as we saw in the election results. How do you feel that's going to play against you?
So are you alluding to the tax cuts that spurred on the economic growth that we've seen over the last 2 years of 3% growth? If you're alluding to that Peter Roskam was heavily involved in the tax reform that led to this economic growth, then I'm all on board with Peter Roskam in that process. I mean, but for the Trump economy, would Illinois not be doing as good as it's doing? Because it's the Democrats that have destroyed the business opportunities here. And last session under Pritzker, they made it far worse. And unfortunately, Mayor Lightfoot's doubling down from, her further mandates on business, including the latest saying that, the government now gets to decide how you schedule your employees. So big government regulations kill business opportunity. And fortunately, Donald Trump has reversed a lot of that and then gave corporate tax cuts to corporations so that they can invest more in the people and in their businesses. And so I'm all on board for that. And I just think that, unfortunately, tax cuts, you couldn't visibly see it in your tax return prior to the election. And if you had, you would have thought differently of them, because the New York Times, even, I love this one, their headline was on an article was, look, if you didn't think you got a tax cut, you probably did. Because most don't even understand. They think that if their refund was less, that they didn't get a tax cut. It's just preposterous. People don't even understand their own tax return.
And to that point, I mean, there was a lot of good that Roskin was the architect of. And so by all accounts, he should have, in theory, been a strong candidate, but Kasten came in this left of left sort of mandate.
Kasten put Donald Trump around his neck. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, no, sure, they're going to try that. And I've been in Springfield for 6 years. You have to work with a lot of personalities. Some of them you don't agree with everything that they say, but you still work with them. But I support Trump policies on, closing the border, changing our asylum laws, protecting citizens, increasing defense readiness, which doesn't always have to mean increasing the defense budget, by the way, but increasing the defense readiness. I agree with him on tax cuts. I agree with him on being tough on China. I agree with him on getting out of the Paris Climate Accord, which is something that China was never even a subject to, and they're the biggest polluters in the world. Not to mention CO2 is really not a pollutant. I agree with him on a lot of the core policies. And I'm not Donald Trump, and he's not me, and that's just the truth.
Jeannie, I'll tell you where I disagree with Donald Trump. The fellow I wanted to be president is Rand Paul. I just wanted. I'm pro supporting our military, but I'm not pro supporting kids with their boots on the ground in order to sell, weaponry. I just don't like it. I think there's been a lot of mistakes in that field, particularly in the Middle East. So I was for Rand Paul, and then here comes Donald Trump and sucks that oxygen out of the room too. Now I see Iran and the people who are around Donald Trump, not Mike Pompeo and legitimate, but I see Bolton, people like that. And anybody who was with the neocons, I have a really hard time dealing with. And I see Bolton out there playing this game, his guy playing this game. And I get, it's like, I just crossed the icy river. It just bothers me.
Yeah. No, I have skin in the game. My one son, the Army Ranger, just exited the military. His name's on a list if anything really happened. And my other son is a Navy pilot. So the last thing I want them to do is to have to go into a needless war unprepared. So the number one thing Donald Trump understands is that deterrence is only effective if it's backed up by a strong military that's ready and trained and can go at it and has the best technology and the sophisticated weapon system so that you can hit the enemy from afar and save lives. That said, boots on the ground are the only way that you can hold ground. That's the infantry's entire job, is to hold ground until you can get a diplomatic solution. That is their job, is to take and hold ground. However, I don't want boots on the ground. No way. Not for Venezuela. Not for Iran. We're going to, and so there's a difference between who he selects for on a diplomatic corps mission and who he selects as his military leaders. And so we'll see how this happens. But I don't know. I don't think that Trump is an aggressive militaristic guy. I just don't see that in him from what I've seen so far on his choices.
Actually, I see the never Trumpers being the aggressive military personalities, the ones who, even though the left calls everybody a chicken hawk, the never Trumpers I see are the people, sort of the moderate, squishy ones that don't think about putting their kids or other kids in the sand.
Well, it's always somebody else's kid. Let's face it, it's always somebody else's kid. Less, 0.5% of American citizens ever serve in uniform. It's always somebody else's mission to protect the Constitution and really protect the U.S. so that they can protect everybody from around the world. Trump is absolutely right in terms of making our allies carry the weight too. So I'm 100% behind him on all that. So when we can talk about policies, I'd love to talk about policies and how I align with the president on specific policies.
How do you not align with Sanguinetti? Because before you get to Kasten, you have to win the primary. Well, there you got Sanguinetti. You got, it's like a redo of the primary in a way, right?
Well, so you know what? So people get to make that choice again. I mean, if you like crony bailouts of corporations, if you like Chicago Public Schools being bailed out on the backs of suburban taxpayers in the 6th congressional district, if you like taxpayer funding of abortion, if you like tax increases, quite frankly, and unbalanced budgets, then you're going to love my primary opponent because she cheered on her boss, Governor Rauner, during all of that. Stuck by him, side by side, sanctuary state, lawlessness, you name it, stuck by him. So that is who my primary opponent is. That's who she's aligned himself with. And so we're happy to have that conversation about who do you think best represents the idea that America is a free society and the free enterprise system works because we are a nation governed by laws. And we can't abandon certain laws and enforce other laws. We can't do that. And they certainly proved that they're willing to do that under the Rauner administration.
Well, will Rauner give her money to run? Has he already?
Well, from her filings, he and his wife, gave the federal max out that they could personally. It doesn't matter, honestly. Look, in the 6th congressional district, we beat the Rauner campaign during the primary.
Oh, I got to look at those numbers. And so how is the property tax issue the big issue out there locally?
Oh, property taxes are a huge issue, and Rauner and the Sanguinetti team failed to address that issue. But this is a federal election, and essentially the question we need to call the question: do you think that you should export big government Chicago-style policies to the federal government? Because if you do that, then you're essentially going to, we're the worst run state in the nation, and you're just going to make us the country less well off if you take on those same policies. And that's exactly who Sean Kasten is. He's a big government socialist. And it doesn't sell well at all here.
There's stuff that in his past that he said that sounds really crazy, okay? If I'm not mistaken, he said some wacky things comparing the president to... he just played that, that hard left Gang of Four game. By the way, Dan Proft calls them the Socialist Spice Girls. I call them the Gang of Four, which I think is more accurate. Right, and it's
I like both of those compared to calling them anything related to a squad, because the squad has a military connotation. So either one of the other ones is good. But the name calling, I really don't get into the name calling, honestly.
Right.
It's just so dumb and unproductive for the most part. You don't have to go there. But if you want to talk about name calling, it was Sean Kasten who compared our president to Osama bin Laden. That's outrageous. And it was Sean Kasten who said that, when asked for a leader that he looked up to, mentioned, the bigot, Dan Savage, who had said Christians are nothing more than a piece of the S word, and said that every single Republican should be effing dead. And yet this is who Sean Kasten says he looks up to. So, and he never disavowed any of those comments made by the person that he picked out as somebody he admires. He said he admires him. And so, I'm not into name calling. I don't do that. I never did as a state rep. I look at the policy, and I think most people understand that about me.
I'll do some name calling, and I will.
Okay.
I will title Jeanne Ives a certified badass, just for your military career. Certified badass, and of course, just serving the country. A lot of our politics don't probably line up, but that doesn't mean anything to me.
But mine do.
But yours do, and that's why we do the podcast. So, Jeanne Ives, thanks so much for joining us. I know it's a long slog before you get to the finish line, and we hope to connect with you again.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
For Jeanne Ives, running in the 6th Congressional District, Republican, U.S. Army officer, retired, mom of 2 soldiers.